And welcome back to Survivor Hot Takes. It is me, Coach Drew, aka Earl Cole's Grin, which is a spoiler for later. Uh, with Emily, as always. Emily, how are you?
Oh my gosh, I'm just thriving. This is the best day of my life because guess what, y'all? Dry January is canceled. So I'm just living my best life today. How are you doing today, Andrew?
I'm doing well. Just got back from the bar trivia,
Goodbye.
trivia, and today we're gonna before we get into the deep stuff moving forward with the rest of the month, and spoiler alert, rest of the month we're gonna be discussing the four African American winners of Survivor. Um, Today we've decided to be fun to talk about our favorite Blindsides, and we're just gonna do a top five because that's the easiest thing to do.
Mhm.
And so when I think about a Blindside, so Micronesia was like one of these big examples of Jeff saying, "Oh yeah, the art of the blind side, this, that, and the
Mhm.
other." And I've watched with a lot of people, and people that like sit there at home like, "Oh, it's not really a blind side because we know what's going to happen usually."
Right.
And it's like, yes, as an audience member, we kind of know what's going to happen, but as a player, it is absolutely still a blind side because they have no idea what's going to happen. And I think
Absolutely.
that these five that we have each are going to show more how we like what we enjoy about the show and the seasons especially. So
Definitely.
we're gonna go back and forth if there's any type of overlap or anything that we might want to agree or disagree on, we'll do that. Emily can start us off.
Am I going to start us off? Okay, so lock and load, y'all, because I'm starting off with a big one. As we all know, Survivor David versus Goliath is one of the most iconic series, especially in the last like 5 or 6 seasons. I think that it's one of my favorites. And we've talked about this. We've even already done a feature on this. So I think whenever I think of a blind side, I think of something that is catastrophic, that really shifts the trajectory of the game. So it's not just one person being shocked, but it's many people being shocked, maybe even people who are in the same alliance, who had no idea if there was an additional twist coming. So you're going to see a lot of those kind of in my hot takes. The big one for my very first one, we're starting off with John, the mayor of Salamtown, in David versus Goliath. He got completely dumbfounded in that season because at this point they were divided 6-6, which the Goliaths had a little bit more of an advantage at that point, right? And they thought they had it all in the bag, not knowing that the Davids had 3 advantages in their pocket to their knowledge, right? And then Davy, our boy, came in knowing that Christian was the person that was going to be their target, did not tell the majority of his alliance, and played the idol for Christian, which saved Christian. And then the Goliaths were like, oh my gosh, like we have an idol too. Like, what are we supposed to do? Right. So Dan tried to play it thinking that everyone would throw their votes on Angelina because she was the one who was least likely able to keep an advantage or to have someone play an idol for her, since she just threw the Elizabeth vote and was trying to do some jury management. So whenever,
Typical
so
Angelina.
what?
Typical Angelina.
Oh, just typically Angelina. Yeah, a queen. So by them being able to kind of split that minority vote, they put a few on Angelina, and she thought that she was completely safe, and they put a few on John. That was the thing that really changed the trajectory of the game and put the Davids in a power position for the first time in the entire season. So that's my very first one.
For someone that has recently rewatched David vs. Goliath, as you have as well, I
Love
will
it.
say that I won't say that the season was lackluster before that because it absolutely was not.
Mhm.
But that episode, right after like I think it was a unanimous vote for Elizabeth right before, for it to go down like that, and then the game becomes more fluid from that episode on. I think
Yeah.
that was definitely the turning point as far as people moving in and out of alliances in that season. So I won't say that it's where the season picked up because the season was top tier from beginning to end. But that's definitely when the season decided to, people started to move around. So
Absolutely.
I would say that, and it's not on my list, but I agree with it. I really like it.
It's a
Um,
good one. Yeah.
it is my number five. Is probably if we were talking about iconic blindsides, I think it would definitely be in the top 3. It's the JT blindside and Heroes versus Villains.
That's on mine too. That's on my list too. Okay, tell me why it's yours. Tell me everything.
So the reason it's one of my favorites is because I think it's one of the greatest episodes of all time because they're just and I've done an episode on this before last summer talking about was the JT move a dumb move, and I honestly don't think it was like the dumbest thing that's ever happened. And if you want to know why, find it in the in our little thingies at the on the side. But having said that, from beginning to end, where JT is trying to help out Russell because he thinks that the women are taking over on the villains tribe, and everyone on the villains tribe is sitting there like, "Oh yeah, JT and Rupert are stupid. Let's do this, that, and the other." And then merge happens. Amanda can't tell a lie to save her life. Parvati reads it very easily.
Oh yeah.
Gives a confessional saying, "Hey, I just spent all of Micronesia working with this girl. I know when she's lying, when she's not, and she's a shit liar." And figuring out, all I have to do is I've got these 2 idols. I'll just play them with these people. Parvati gives up immunity to Danielle during the endurance challenge, and it all sets the stage for this epic tribal council where JT and the rest of the heroes think that they have it in the bag. Sandra's sitting there saying, "Hey, you probably shouldn't trust these people, especially Russell. Don't be dumb." And they're like, "Oh no, Sandra, you don't know what you're talking about." Which and we get to Parvati playing the first idol, the hero sitting there still being smug, like, "Oh, we still got her because she played on the wrong person."
Yeah.
And then she plays it again, and it's like, yeah,
It was the
you done messed up, JT, and we get textbook Rupert not actually being a hero with, "I knew we shouldn't have trusted that bitch."
I followed that too, and like that was something that like I never caught until I was like really rewatching like a ton of Blindsides to try to put together my top 5. And like Rupert really was convinced that he was in the right, and he was like, "I knew we shouldn't have trusted him. I knew it." But in reality, he was leading the charge to help try to bring Russell over to their side to be their like golden ticket out,
Yeah. So why is it on your top 5 besides everything I just said?
This is why it's on my top 5, because so my favorite thing about a blindside is whenever it blindsides people in ways they didn't expect. So Russell gave his first idol to Parv thinking, he's like, "Well, you're going to play this and you're going to be fine. I know that the target's on you because they trust me and like they're telling me that you're the person being out." And Parv's like, "Oh dang, like thanks so much," right? And he had no idea that she already had another idol, So her playing these 2 idols not only blindsided the really cocky heroes at this point, it also blindsided the person who thought was in charge of the entire game, which was Russell. So and he was so upset, but watching how good she was at being able to kind of manipulate and control his thoughts and emotions in that kind of way, like I think really sealed one of the best. That was actually my number 3. So we're like kind of in the same realm. We're like
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just even if you want to fast forward you should never fast forward any episode of Survivor.
Yeah. Except for this one.
If you want to fast forward to that tribal council, everything in that tribal is memorable, from Courtney whispering if that little troll pulls out an idol, to Russell saying, "We got some explaining to do," and Parvati saying, "Oh, it's a secret."
And how about like the poetic justice of JT basically being voted out with the idol that he gave Russell, in theory.
Yeah.
Like, I just think that like, I mean, obviously at this point, they do have limited knowledge of who Russell is because he's the only person that they weren't able to see play and to be able to see his reputation, since like he was on season 19 and then they filmed season 20 basically like right after. So they weren't able to see who he was in his gameplay and why he was even on the villains in the first place, So I think that in itself really limited their mobility and their understanding. It was kind of their Achilles heel of the entire season,
Yeah, I agree. For the record, my top 5 list, as far as favorites, there are going to be 3 that I feel like most people wouldn't have on their list. Maybe 2. So it's all uphill for me, but I feel like it's going to be more downhill for a lot of people watching this. Like, oh, really? You're going to put that on there? And it's like, yes, for the culture, as you'll see soon.
It's good though. It's good.
Number 4.
Oh, number 4 for me. Oh, this one is the one where I was drunk texting you. I drunk text you every time I'm watching Survivor because that's just like you're like my go-to person with that because like you just get it, you know? And I just love Survivor so much. And you also understand my affinity for the show. And so the first my number 4, I chose this one because sometimes people aren't just blindsided by other people. Sometimes they're just blindsided by the technicalities of the game. And we've seen that a lot before. We've seen it with Dan with the idol nullifier. Like, you know, like that was something that he wasn't prepared for. And there was nothing that would have prepared him for that because that didn't even exist. So for my number 4, I said the Suri Game Changers vote out, which is Advantage Gate, aka the most heartbreaking, oh my gosh, like it's the most heartbreaking tribal council because she was leading the lambs to the slaughter, you know,
Yep.
like I think that she had the best chance to win that season at that point.
No one voted for her. No one voted for her at Final 6.
No one had her name in their mouth. And like, and they basically divided it, wasn't it? It was between, there was 1 vote for Aubrey, there were a few for Sarah, and I think there were a few for Ty. And every single person, like that's the one concern that I have with all of the advantages, you know, is that every single person has a season, you know, every single person had an advantage and they tried to wait until the very end to play them all, and they all freaking played them all.
Smartly.
It's smart.
Yeah.
It's smart, but my concern was that it was just too much. And like that was the big thing I was concerned about in season 41 too, because everyone like was getting like a buttload of advantages, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, so that was the one. She is my absolute favorite player to never win. I love that woman. I would die for her.
So if you were to play, this is like a fun game that people play on Twitter. If you were to play, would you blow your game for her?
Oh, 100%. Like
Yeah.
and I wouldn't even knowingly do it. Like I wouldn't even know it. Like I would trust that woman with my life, and then she would cut my throat and I would say thank you. Like that's exactly how it would have gone.
Thank you so much. Well, and I've said this plenty of times on this show and plenty of times on other shows and plenty of times on social media. This bullshit argument that, oh, these players were robbed and this, that, and the other. And it's like, Suri is the only truly robbed player in the history of the show. And if you really want to argue about it, probably more than once. But if you don't want to argue about it, we'll just say once in Game Changers because she didn't have a chance of doing anything. Every other person that the internet has deemed robbed, there is a situation where that person could have done something else in order to not be robbed.
Yeah.
I obviously don't have this on my favorites list just because I just feel sick.
The emotional damage.
This is.
I still count that as a blindside, even though it wasn't.
Well, it was absolutely a blindside.
She was blindsided by the game. You know,
it's a blindside. It's just it shouldn't have gone down that way. We should have had Suri as the winner that we all deserve, and not, you know.
Do you think she'll come back for another season or no?
I think that if they ever did a legend season, that they would absolutely call her, and I think she would play. But I don't think they're doing a legend season anymore. I don't think that they will. I don't know. I think that ship may have sailed as far as them doing that because they did Winners at War, so they already had probably 3 or 4 people that they would have casted for their legend season anyway.
Definitely. But I do think that like the way that she left was very poetic. Like everyone gave her like a standing ovation, applause, you know, so I think that they tied a beautiful like little bow on that, you know, and I think that would pretty much have been the end, you know?
Yeah, because the worst thing that can happen is she comes back and immediately gets voted out first, and it's like, oh, well.
Yeah, definitely.
Then we forget about how she went out, like the round of applause and the thank you, Suri, and all that, which I don't know why. That actually gets me teared up every time when Jeff, because it's one of those moments where like Jeff, especially in season 41, he has these moments where it's like, okay, he's definitely just pandering, whatever. But in
Mhm.
that moment, it didn't feel like Jeff was pandering. It felt like Jeff was literally saying, legitimately saying, "Thank you, Suri. Like you've been amazing in the 4 times we've had you."
And he let her say it. Like, that was the
Yeah,
other thing. Like, I rewatched it today whenever I was on my treadmill, like, working on my fitness, and I saw it, and I was like it
yeah.
was
It's,
so sad.
it's
I was so
really good.
upset.
It's great television, and it's crazy as it sounds, even though I hate the moment, the everything surrounding it, that part right there is a great moment, and one of the best parts of that season is
Definitely.
just their interaction. Um, and then her leaving and her giving her exit confessional, which is still
Yeah.
it's amazing. My number four is not as sad, I guess. It's actually quite opposite. I love it. I don't cry at all watching this one. And Survivor Micronesia, which you just recently talked about, um, where everyone's favorite challenge beast, Ozzy, gets blindsided by the Black Widow Brigade. And one of the moments where Queen Suri, once again uh, brings up and eventually orchestrates along with everyone else this blindside of Ozzy after Jason basically gives up immunity so that people don't hate him,
Yes.
and they all decide, hey, let's just vote out Ozzy.
Mhm.
And as the votes are being read, and this is not my favorite. This is not my favorite blindsided person's look moment. We'll get to that later. But Ozzy's face as he slowly starts to realize, like, I've been screwed up.
Yeah.
And,
It's I love that. I love the entire, like, development. I'm sorry, my dog is excited again. I if you hear the scratching, I'm not keeping
yeah,
anyone hostage in my house. It's just my dog
okay,
who just wants love. Um, I love that same one. And I stepped away from Micronesia stuff just because it was like the season of the Blind Side. Like, it made the Blind Sides cool, you know?
yeah,
And what I loved, like, specifically with Ozzy, is that I remember so vividly. He's like, we would be idiots not to vote Jason out. But in reality, they would have been idiots to do something completely different,
yeah,
and actually just stick with the plan, because that was way too easy. It was an easier vote, you
yeah.
know?
You get out the person that had just shown in his previous season that he could go on an immunity streak. You get rid of
Yes.
the person that you all know has an idol. You get rid of the person that Ozzy's probably not taking all of us to the, obviously he's not taking all of us to the end. He's probably
Right.
taking Amanda or James to the
Right.
end.
100%.
If I'm Sari, Parvati, Natalie, Alexis, any of these people, my name's not Amanda or James. Let's go ahead, nip this in the bud now. Hey, we have full control over Jason now because Jason's going to trust us because we said we weren't going to vote for him and we didn't.
True.
And next time we come to him with some BS, basically, he'll believe it and he won't play an idol that he has, which we talked about last week. Once again, it's in the little sidebar. I loved this blind side. Even the cringy moments like where Ozzy like turns back and stares everyone down like he was really gonna do something.
He's so
Um
theatrical for no reason. Like, I just
and then his
I
whole
live for it.
Ponderosa that season is just like him sulking for the first few episodes. It's like, oh man, I can't believe it. It's like get over
Well,
yourself. Get over
yeah.
yourself.
Like, and the other thing that, like, I really want to touch on with that same blind side, if we have a moment, is this. I feel like there's kind of a Mandela effect that goes on with Ozzy's blind side. Is that, like, Parvati did this, she did X, Y, and Z. She was the one who orchestrated every single blind side, and she was the face of it. But in reality, like, and I know that they only show us what we want to see. So I mean, keep my margin of error in consideration. But Suri was the first one who really brought it to everyone's attention that this would be a perfect opportunity, and it's something that she really brooded on for episodes and episodes. So I still want to give, like, the credit to her for being the
Absolutely.
person to round everyone up, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I You'll never hear me say that it wasn't
Justice for
Suri.
Suri, man.
You'll
I
never
just
hear me say it wasn't Suri. But we can
So
go
you
ahead.
think so too, right? Because everyone that I know has always said that it was her fault, and I'm like, I don't really think that it was part of like choice. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it was her choice, but like, it wasn't like her call. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can go ahead.
Well, actually, I'm gonna actually let you take your third one, if you want to go to your third, because my third was JT the Heroes
Yeah,
versus
yeah,
Villains. So you
sure.
can take the next. You can take number three.
Third is one of those ones that I referenced earlier. It's actually the where I get my name from for this episode, or for this episode that we're recording. Earl Cole's Grin, because I'm talking about the Edgardo Blindside and Survivor Fiji, in which the four horsemen, they're riding high. They've got an idol. They're going to take full control of the game, even though they really don't trust Dreams. They're still going to do their whole thing, and everyone that's not in the Four Horsemen Alliance decides, hey, let's just vote Edgardo because we know that the idol is going to be played on either Alex or Mookie or Dreams. Probably not Dreams. Alex
Definitely
or
not
Mookie.
Dreams.
So let's just vote Edgardo and see what happens. So, the votes are coming out and blah, blah, blah. And that first Edgardo, I think either the first or second Edgardo vote where Edgardo's face drops, Alex's grin goes away, and then they cut to Earl, and he's got this little smug grin on his face, like we got him. I have a lot of Survivor gifs on my phone. That one is the one that I use the most, just because Earl Cole's grin as everything goes down is so amazing, because because that had never happened before. Like, that had never happened where, let's just vote for and it's all credit to Stacy. But it had never happened to the point where the idols played on, we know who these people are going to, oh my gosh, who the idol's probably going to. Mm-hmm. So let's just vote for the person that's least likely to get it, which would be Edgardo in that situation. I don't know. I have to slow down to say that, but here we
You're
are.
doing great. You're doing great.
And it's so, and Fiji, I mean, we will eventually do a Fiji, it's coming soon because we have to talk about Earl Cole this month. Fiji is so underrated for moments like that. Like, Fiji has a lot of moments I think people sleep on because they don't like the way that pre-merge went. For some reason, a large part of the internet doesn't like the final three. I assume it's because of some reason that we won't touch on right now. But Fiji is a very underrated season, and it's the first of two underrated seasons that I have on my list, which we'll get to in a second. But do you remember what I'm talking about? And no,
to be honest, you're gonna hate me. And like, here's my thing, okay? I am not a fan of Fiji. Like, I mean, if I honestly, if I had to rank it, and like, I don't have my ranks with me. I only ranked, I think, like my top 5 or 10.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's not my top 10 or anything, but yeah.
No. I mean, I liked Earl, and I was satisfied with Earl being the winner. Like, it was nothing like that. I remember with Fiji, the concept that I did was it Fiji? Like, the concept that I didn't like was that they divided it like 50-50. So it was like, some people got everything, and then some people got nothing. And like, obviously, we're gonna know the people who got everything are gonna do well. It was pretty predictable for me for most of it, until like I remember a few key moments in that season. I remember Earl being the winner. I'm being very happy for Earl. I remember Dreams not giving back the car to who was it? What was his name?
No,
again?
not giving the cars, giving immunity to Yao-Man.
After Yao-Man gave him the car. Yeah. And so like, I remember a few things with that. I don't remember this specific Blindside, but I really I'm glad that you're picking it up, because honestly, with old school Blindsides, they were so overlooked because a lot of people kind of focused on like the strength, like who was the strongest and who had the most wit in the right situations. But in those, like, the Blindsides weren't something that were really commandeered until later seasons.
And I agree with that. I think that before, I think China laid the groundwork, but that Micronesia was that
Yes.
first time where we were constantly like it was the blindsides were in our face.
Yes.
So in a situation like Fiji where Edgardo's being blindsided, it's not really looked at as anything other than wow, that was a cool moment there. But it doesn't really matter because now this, that, and the other is going to happen. But I think from then on, because that was season 14, from then on, when a blindside happens, Jeff's very vocal about it. Everyone, when they get back to camp at the beginning of the next episode, are very vocal about it. So I think that was, I think that's a big change as far as how Survivor production and who Jeff looked at blindsides.
Absolutely. And how critical it is to assure that like it's an airtight sort of blindside. Like those are the ones that are the most effective. They're the ones that have been able to withstand the test of time. So like I'm glad that you share that because I'm gonna have to rewatch that season. Like it's definitely, I would say honestly, in my bottom 10. Like, and it has nothing to do with the winner. I love the winner. I just thought that it was such a slow burn for me, and like I need to rewatch maybe to kind of pick up on some of the strategies, that we still use now in like modern Survivor world,
No. Yeah, you should definitely give Fiji another chance. You should also give my number 2 another chance, but we'll see. We'll get to that in a second. Your number 2.
I think I feel like I know your number 2. I actually have another repeater from the same season that I talked about before, and I love it because my jaw was on the floor. It was the birth of another tradition, which is in Game Changers again, but it was the vote out of Malcolm. That was I think that was the first time that we ever really witnessed the concept of like a live tribal. Like we had like maybe a few whispers here and there where someone says the wrong thing and it makes someone change their mind, but
stick to the plan.
Yeah, stick to the plan. Yes. See, you know everything. This was my favorite live tribal. And it was because like there were so many things that could happen with this specific tribal. We were divided into 3 different tribes. Only one tribe got immunity. So then there were 2 other tribes. And it was basically like Team Brad Culpepper versus Team Sandra. We all know who we're voting for. Long live the queen, right? And she was so confident that she even said, I was leading the lambs to the slaughter. She had it planned. And she didn't know, unbeknownst to her, that like it was going to be like the JT and Malcolm were trying to plan a coup against her, until JT
and his infinite wisdom.
This man, like
his infinite wisdom.
This man, I have so much respect for him and how he played Tocantins, and that's it. Because he makes big moves and he wants to make big moves, and I respect that. But the execution is just a little rocky sometimes. So him literally, I don't know, like going in front of his entire tribe and whispering to Brad Culpepper to vote for Sandra, maybe not the best move, because it got people talking and turning. And because of that, it really bit him in the ass. And that's what caused Malcolm to be voted out, which is his closest ally in this entire season. But he wasn't the first target. He wasn't the second. He wasn't even the third. So them choosing him was so tactical and strategic. Ty used an idol to play for Sierra. Like,
pretty lady.
I give this to pretty lady. And it was so cool to also watch like how Ty kind of like fell in submission to like what Brad Culpepper wanted him to do. You could just see he did like one quick nod. He dropped it over to Sierra. Yeah. Mind blowing. Absolutely. Like honestly, like there was so much that happened that even though I'm so upset that Malcolm left, especially in that way, my jaw, it was like a 15-20 minute tribal council. And every second things were changing. So I love that season. It was definitely one of my favorite blindsides of all time.
My favorite moment of that entire tribal is Haley. I didn't consent.
Because she stopped, and I think that she really thought they were going to try to like make her a better deal or something like that. And Jeff was like, But
Okay, you
she's
might
like, "Wait, you're
regret it.
gonna regret this." I
Haley's
don't
I didn't consent is like the best Haley moment across 2 seasons.
honestly though, like Haley in Game Changers, like she came on to Game Changers, and I'm like, why? Because like I didn't really remember any big waves that she made in her previous season. But this season, like this woman was like an intellectual threat. I honestly would love to see her one more time if she was given like the right
I'm pretty sure she's a
ability to
lawyer.
stretch her legs, you know?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she's a lawyer. If I remember correctly, I think she was either in law
She is.
school.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. She's a lawyer.
Yeah, I enjoy that tribal. I enjoy it more because of the aftermath that next time that they go to tribal when they
Yes.
take out JT and what was it either Michaela or Sandra said say hi to Malcolm for me.
I think it was Michaela because I feel
Michaela,
like
say
Sandra,
hi to
like
Malcolm for me.
Sandra was definitely more cocky in that season, but she was more cocky, like she was a little bit more cocky, like with Brad Culpepper. Was that the same season? Like,
Yeah.
that's what you get for plotting
No,
against
no,
me.
no.
And
She
the
got rid of
queen,
Tony. When they got rid of Tony, when they
yeah,
yeah,
Tony.
but it's like Sandra fan fiction this season where it's like, oh, Sandra goes home. I don't know if this is true. Sandra goes home and she reads, oh, people don't think that I'm a great winner, even though I've won twice because of the way that I played. Okay, I'll just play overly strategically in a season, and the only reason I get voted out is because they decide to do 2 swaps during the
Yeah.
season. I feel like if they had only done the 1 swap, Sandra was in a perfect position to once again make the merge, in which case she doesn't do challenges and she would have just done Sandra things to get to the end.
Yeah, I know that like a lot of people, which I'm going to talk about this later, spoiler alert, like a lot of people like had this kind of like against her, is that she ended up like she contributed to a few challenges in the first 2 seasons, but like by the time she got to Game Changers, she had like a quote unquote like Sandra seat. Like they call that a lot in Winners at War cuz like she wasn't able to defend herself, and her strategy is to just be like
Just not me. Just not
but
me.
I will say, and I'm not going to spoil anything for anyone else who's a big Survivor fan. If you like Survivor and if you like Sandra, I highly recommend watching Survivor Australia right now, Blood versus Water. She and her daughter are incredible, and you have to watch it. Like honestly, I've been watching it, and it just blows my mind to see how much her daughter has learned from her. It's brilliant, so good.
I plan on binge watching. I haven't started watching it, but I plan on binge watching
Ah,
at least the first couple of weeks at the end of next week. So I'm
good.
hoping to avoid spoilers up to that point. We'll see how long that lasts. My number two. My number two is all the way back in season 4, Survivor Marquesas.
Miss Vecepia.
With Vecepia, with Queen
Vecepia.
Vecepia. The I won't call it the first Blindside because I feel like there were a few that happened in the first 3 seasons, but the first Blindside that I remember as being like, wow, they actually did it when they voted up John Carroll. So Boston Rob leaves in 10th, and at 9 you have the Row 2 Alliance, which is led by the Row 2 4. They do the it's not touchy subjects on Survivor. I don't remember the name of it, but basically the pecking order challenge. I'll call it the pecking order challenge, where if you're Pascal and Nalia, you see, oh, this is the order people are getting taken out in, which means that we are 5 and 6. Let's go to the Kathy and Sean and say, hey, we're ready to flip. John Carroll is sitting there. He has his big moment, a big confession where he's like, oh, I feel like they, Pascal and Nalia like are trying to help me win, and like he's such a great villain for that season. And it sucks that we have never gotten him back. We've got Boston Rob back 4 other times.
Yeah.
I loved John Carroll as a character. So we get to the tribal. Pascal and Nalia flip and take out John, and then yes, they basically pagong the rest of the Row 2 4 on the way to that final 5. But it's the reason it's iconic to me is, one, because Giuseppe is one of my favorite winners.
Of course.
But two, because that as a 10, 11-year-old kid, up to that point, I had never seen the minority alliance flip on the majority
Yeah.
and take them out. It was always pretty, if the majority is in control, the majority is always going to be control. The end. You have to
And
pick
that was
your
like
winner
such
based
a
off of one of these
cozy,
people.
yeah, like that's such a cozy piece of like early millennial television was, you know, just like watching the pecking order and just seeing who's going to be the next one. But like, you know, obviously Survivor knew they had to step up their game. But I loved Marquesas. And one of the big reasons that I loved Marquesas as well was Sean. I would love to
I
see Sean
love
back.
Sean. Yeah.
Him,
Yeah, they're not going to
what
do it.
the way that he was able to orchestrate his own protection, like his confessional whenever he was holding up a vote and you didn't know who the vote was going to be for, like blew my mind. That was like pure theatrics. He was like, you thought you were done with me, but it's not going to be me.
You mean checkmate, bro. You
Yeah.
thought you had
Oh,
me.
that man is the love of my life, and I hope that one day I will get to meet him because that was like I rewatched all of Survivor whenever COVID hit, you know, and that was like my big project, and it was really something that really got me invested. And that was the first time I think that my jaw like really dropped that entire, you know, when it started, because it was at that point it was cozy, and then we got to like expect the unexpected, you know.
Mhm.
So loved it. I was rooting for him so bad. I'm so sad he didn't like
Well,
make.
and I don't want to go on a Sean Rector tangent, but
I love it.
one of my favorite things about him, especially on a rewatch, is that last tribal that he was at before he got voted out. He was in there fighting, like, please don't
Yes.
do this, Kathy. Come with us, Kathy. If you go with them, Pascal and Aaliyah have straight up said they are not voting against each other. If you come with us, me and Giuseppe have never actually said it. We're just being looked at as a duo because we're black. Now, I don't. Do I think they would have actually voted for each one another? No, I think they would have probably gone to the end. What do I know? But he's in there fighting, and then as soon as they vote him out, he immediately goes into real life mode. Like, hey, it's been a pleasure. But like, he's not bitter. At least from what we see, he's not bitter about it. He's just takes the loss as it is, and he leaves with grace. And I loved that about him. And I loved Marquesas is such an underrated season. I
It
say
is
that.
an underrated season. And I honestly like I love Giuseppe. I think that she was like such a deserving winner, so tactical and like thoughtful with every single move that she made. And that was
Yeah.
something, I think it's because it's so early in the series that people tend to like look over, you know, but they had so many good underdog stories they really could have branched out on that I wish that we got more of, you know.
Yeah, and
We just didn't.
we will save the Giuseppe talk for this month because Giuseppe
Definitely.
is another winner that we will be talking about it this month. But on to your number one.
Are you ready? It's the most devastating moment of my life. Are you
Oh,
ready?
God. Okay.
Oh my god. Okay, this is the saddest thing, and this is also something that I drunk texted you about. Okay, my number one, and it's because it's beautiful and I hate it in the best way, is Winners at War. When Sandra was voted out by Denise with her own fucking
Yeah.
idol. That was it for me. That was
Yeah.
it.
Mess.
That I love that entire that whole series, you know. Winners of War was a tough one for me because we lost all of the OGs at the very start.
We lost all of our
And
favorites. Are you kidding? Oh my
it
God.
was I was not okay the whole season. But like for me, like Sandra was like she is a stone cold player, you know, like every time she plays, her goal is I'll vote out whoever as long as I'm not it, you know? And this is the first time that like she showed a little bit of a softer side, you know, woman to woman, you know, I knew that you're next. This might be a chance for me to be able to extend an olive branch to a player who I kind of see a little bit of myself in, you know. And yes, Unca Dollars. I agree with you. That season was totally crazy. Anyway, I digress. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure someone else agreed with me. and they had a swap, you know, and Sandra, like everyone knew that Denise was gonna get hit, you know, and Sandra went not soft, but she was trying to find a connection, you know, and hopefully extend her longevity in the game because her days were already numbered because she's called the Queen of Survivor. And Denise, rightfully so, didn't do that. She basically
could have gotten rid of Tony.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, this is the thing that bothers me so much is that like she poker faced it so hard, and she was like, you know, like she oh, thank you so much, not realizing that she already had her own idol. So she used an idol to protect not only herself but also Jeremy, and that means that the only vote that counted was to Sandra, and it was like, and you can see like Sandra being so cocky, being like, okay, girl, like, go ahead, girl, like, you got it, like, you know, and every vote reading like Denise, and then that last vote being Sandra, like that, honestly, like, I was also at the point in the pandemic because I watched them all in like 6 months. I was in the pandemic where I was just like emotionally just done, you know. So for that to be my last,
dealt with the Ethan thing a couple episodes. I don't know how much you like Ethan, but like that
I'm
one
in
was
love
like,
with that man.
That one
I
broke
love
me.
him.
I'm like, you guys went after Ethan? Screw you.
Yeah, the love of my life. Like every single one of them, they just kept going one by one, and I was like, "You are monsters." But like, I mean, it was the most poetic way for her to go out. The second that she shows mercy, she's basically like given, you know, the snuff of her torch. And not only that, but she was the only person in Winners at War to choose to not even fight for an edge of extinction, which like blew my mind. And I love Sandra. She's my favorite player of all time, my absolute favorite. So
Sandra's up there for me. Sandra's in my top 10 favorites and probably top 10 favorite winners too. My number one, like, okay, so I know that my last three have been like deep cuts. My number one favorite is probably recency bias because I'm rewatching the season for the 1,000th time because I will watch it at least once every couple months. It's
a little cozy moment.
It's the Andrew Savage Blindside in Cambodia.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Mainly because, like, so in Pearl Islands, I wasn't the biggest Savage fan. I was. It depended on the episode. And then in Cambodia, I'm like, wow, Savage is back. Cool. I like him. There are moments where it's like really cheesy, but I still mess with him. And then the merge, like right before the merge happens, and they decide to vote out Wu instead of taking out Spencer, and Savage is like, oh yeah, these people are playing with deceit and all this other stuff. It's like, all right, cool your jets, man. Like this game is built on this. So he gets his wish, and Cass goes home next, and he's so set on this. Yeah, Joe's
sorry, I was just reading the last comment. Actually, the biggest blindside is the pure fact that Drew doesn't like All Stars. I agree with that 100%. Sorry, go ahead.
we've been there. All Stars is a low B, high C. We've touched on it. All Stars. But back to Andrew Savage. So going into that tribal, you know, we know that Wentworth probably will play it. It all just really depends on how the majority is going to vote, if they're going to split the vote, and, you know, who they're going to vote for. Because it was either going to be Sierra or Kelly. They weren't really going to vote for Abby. Let's be real. And so once you know, everyone's arguing, and, you know, once Kelly gives her idol, I remember my first thought was, oh no, my winner pick that season was one of the times I got the winner pick right. I thought, oh God, they sussed out Jeremy as the leader. Jeremy's done, and there goes my winner pick. And as more Wentworths, you know, will not count still it pops up. I'm like, okay, let's just get to the, you know, the inevitable, and I'm gonna have to root for, I don't know, Tasha now. So
oh my God, Tasha's so
Savage thing, that first Savage comes up, and I just jumped out of my chair. I was watching it alone, I'm pretty sure. Jumped out of my chair. I'm celebrating because it's like, not because I don't like Andrew Savage, but it was more one, Jeremy saved, but two, okay, I'm getting tired of Andrew Savage on my screen being holier than thou at that point. I wasn't a Kelly Wentworth stan, as they call it. At that point, I am now, I would say. But once again, it's the series of much like the JT thing and much like the Edgardo thing, where it's the series of moments that lead up to it that, that payoff that we get at the end. It's amazing. From Will Not Count to Savage putting his torch down, saying unbelievable. Abby with the iconic you made it to the jury, him flipping her off. Cass's face on the jury, Cass flipping everyone off as she walks in during tribal. That entire it's everything involved with the Andrew Savage Blindside during Cambodia will always be, will always stick out to me as, will always be my favorite Blindside that's ever happened. Is it the greatest Blindside that's ever happened? Probably not. Yeah. But as far as something that I want to put on when I'm feeling like that, I could put that on right now and go to sleep and not have any type of thoughts in my head.
No malice. Yeah. I love that season so much. Second Chances is like such an underrated season. I think that people don't talk about it, like honestly, hardly at all. And really? What I love, like, and it's like the best because like people are coming in, and like it's the most emotionally fueled season, like I think like probably like in at least like I would say that the last like 10 seasons from like 30 to 40, like that in itself really, really like amps up the stakes as people literally have not had another chance to fight for it. And this might be their only chance to fight for it because they were from seasons 1 to now, I love that season. I loved Andrew Savage. I was devastated that he was gone, but I'm team Wentworth forever and always, so it was also like a deep breath of fresh air,
Absolutely. And she saved her ass for many an episode after that. Couldn't save Sierra much longer, and I think Abby survived for a little bit longer after that. But yeah. So like I said, I know that at least on my end, 3, maybe 2 of my Blindsides aren't really ones that people like to look at as some of the best, but in my opinion, especially that Marquesas and that Fiji one, are some of the early examples of Blindsides that are not really looked at because they came from earlier seasons.
Yeah, and they set the groundwork for seasons and seasons to come. So I totally agree with you.
Yes, if you've never seen the Edgardo vote out tribal council from Survivor Fiji, either one, fast forward to it, or 2, just look up Earl Cole GIF on Google and you'll get a very brief rundown of how that tribal council went. It'll be Edgardo dropping his face. It'll go Alex smiling and Earl just sitting there with the smug look of, we just played all of you. Now we're in control. I know I've talked a lot about the Fiji one. That's because it's amazing. It probably should be higher on my list, but it is what it is. Them's the breaks. Moving forward for this month, as I mentioned at the top of the hour of the show, we will be discussing the 4 African American winners episode by episode for the next 4 weeks. Just discussing their game, discussing their seasons, and talking about why some are looked at more fondly than others. Once again, I have a theory on that as well. And I'm really excited for it. Emily, excited for it. Yeah, Emily, thank you for your list as always.
Gosh, thank you for existing. This was like the most fun that I think I've ever had in my life putting this together. So thanks for humoring me and letting us do this for a feature.
Thank you all for tuning in as always. I know we went a little longer this time around, but we had fun. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Make sure to follow us on Spotify and all the other thingies. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media sites, Instagram, Twitter, and make sure to follow if you want to follow us on like us individuals.
Follow us on Twitter. I want to be famous. Just do
great. But until then, we will see y'all on the other side.